The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View. The People's View is a show sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee. The committee meets every second Thursday at the Crown Plaza. And if you want to contact us, we have a website, nashuagop.org. And at the end of the show, you'll see some contact phone numbers or email addresses that you may want to send us your comments and recommendations. Thank you for listening in.
Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Hello. Today our guest is Jim Rubens, from candidate for Senate in District 2 in New Hampshire. Jim, how's everything going with your race?
Going really, really well. We're about, right as we speak right here, we're about 2 weeks before the primary. And the big things about my campaign, Jim Rubens, website, first of all, jimrubens.com, as perhaps people can see on the screen. Running for US Senate, looking to replace Jeanne Shaheen. And the difference between myself and the incumbent and the other candidates who are running in the Republican primary is I've lived here in the state for 40 years. I have started and run 10 small businesses in the state here. I have served in public life. I served in the state Senate in voluntary capacity for the past 20 years. So I've really got a pretty good roots and connection to the state of New Hampshire, and it helps me understand what the state needs. I served in the state Senate, as I mentioned. I'd like to take some of the same approaches I took in the state Senate to the United States Senate, which is solving problems, solving big problems with Republican ideals. Some of the ideals that are really important to our party are things like individual liberty and free markets and constitutionally limited government and balanced budgets. Republicans, to be honest, have not lived up to that stuff. So I'd like to bring an end to business as usual in Washington. We've got very serious problems that require bold solutions. When I served in the state Senate, campaigned in my district, had never held office before. I campaigned on electricity competition. I campaigned on charter schools. I campaigned on victim restitution. I campaigned on SB 2 or all-day voting in the privacy of a voting booth on your school and town budgets. And I got those things done. People like the idea of problems being solved. I'll go to charter schools very briefly. We have a charter school right here in Nashua called the Academy of Science and Design. They are the top testing school in the state, and they run it at half or under the cost of our traditional K-12 schools. And we show through charter schools, which allows parents' choice, bottom-up innovation, different schools for different kind of kids. We have schools for at-risk kids. We have charter schools for kids who like to learn tactily. We have schools that are focused on arts and music. We have internship charter schools, and kids are thriving more because the schools are not all the same. Kids are not all the same, and they're operating at a lower cost. So we're solving a lot of problems for a lot of folks, and people's lives are better using these fundamental principles of freedom. So I'd like to take the same approach to Washington. I'll give you just a little sampling of the ideas I've got. We've got problems in the country. We've got education problems in this country. So I'd like to take and eliminate the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, and block grant the special education money back to the states and local school districts, because they can definitely do a better job than the federal government can do. And the states and localities have different needs, and they can experiment and find a better way to help kids learn better, all kinds of kids. I'd like to take a piece of that federal money once it's block granted and create a nationwide voucher program so that parents, deserving parents all over the country in every state, can choose the best public or private school for their kids. On energy, I'd like to end all energy subsidies. I'd like to take away energy subsidies for wind and solar and nuclear and oil and coal and corn ethanol, and let the energy marketplace duke it out. How are they going to duke it out? Instead of going to Washington for subsidies and tax credits, which will complicate the tax code and freeze technology 2 generations behind where it should be, I'd like the energy industry to go back to the customer. What does the customer want? They want clean, abundant, inexpensive energy. We got $100 a barrel oil. That's not the solution to New Hampshire's problems. We need to bring energy costs down, and I believe as soon as we refocused energy innovators in this country away from the feeding problems in Washington, the hiring of the lobbyists and the paying off of politicians so you can get your favorite tax break into law, which corrupts Washington, by the way. Let the energy marketplace go to the customers and give them what they want: inexpensive, clean, abundant energy. And they'll do it faster. Those are some of my ideas. I'm proposing that we have something called super Wi-Fi. We have these oligopolies in our country where we are behind most of the industrial world in broadband and cell service. You can travel around the state of New Hampshire. Infrastructure is vital to an economy. You can travel around and the cell service is awful. You can't get broadband in a lot of places, or it's very slow. I'm proposing we take what is owned by the public, which are the airwaves, that not used by the TV broadcasters, and license it for free back to the public for free use. Now, this is a big fight in Washington because, like many issues in Washington, we can't get common sense done. We can't get it done because the campaign contributors who bought and paid for the politicians who run for office, it costs millions of dollars to run for US Senate, are paid by Comcast and Verizon, and they don't want this kind of competition. They don't want free, open competition. So those are 3 examples of the kind of approach I'd like to take to solving our country's big problems. We've got our country is bankrupt. 1 out of every $5 being spent at the federal level is printed money now, and the debt is being loaded onto our kids and grandkids. They can't possibly pay it. It's completely unfair. It's got to be fixed. Congress, Republicans, and Democrats have kicked the can down the road in this deficit and debt problem for decades now, and now it's got to be fixed. The economy, go ahead.
Excuse me, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to know, if you get elected and you're down there, how do you get the Senate to work together, both parties? I mean, right now, Harry Reid's holding back a lot of legislation. We don't see committees of conference trying to pound out something out of 2 conflicting type of bills. How do you propose to get, even if you get a Republican majority in the Senate, how do you propose to get everybody to work together?
Right. Yeah. First of all, we do need to have 51 or more Republicans in the U.S. Senate, because Harry Reid does not allow any Republican idea, good or bad, even to get onto the floor of the Senate for debate. So it prevents anything from getting resolved. There are 2 schools of thought on moving things forward in Washington. One way, proposed by some candidates in my primary, is to compromise with President Obama. Vote the way he wants us to vote, and then, of course, you can get something done. If you want to do Obama's agenda, like the other candidate I'm running against, yes, you can get more done. We can hasten the country's descent into bankruptcy. We can further impede the economy with laws that are preventing small business from running in our state, like Dodd-Frank, that this gentleman voted for and that Jeanne Shaheen voted for. The other way to do it is what I'm doing, which is to propose bold, strong ideas that are commonsensical, that make a lot of sense to folks, that are so strong, that solve problems, that we will bring reformers out in our party that want to turn this country around and bring us back to freedom, back to smaller government. And you can use those principles, for example, in fixing our economy. I was about to do, we've got an economic problem in this country.
Definitely.
We have seen, and it doesn't require compromising Republican principles. It requires turning those principles into really powerful, strong ideas, so strong that we can get to 60 votes to get by filibuster in the U.S. Senate. It's like my charter school law. I got 20 votes in the state Senate to get it passed. Only 4 voted against it. Jeanne Shaheen was one of the 4. So it shows you can get Democrats to vote for some good stuff if they're powerful enough. So on the economy, I'm proposing, let's fix our tax code. We have a crazy, crazy convoluted tax code where companies like Apple can get away without paying barely any taxes, and General Motors, another American company, has to pay full boat corporate income tax. We're forcing companies offshore. Europe has lower corporate tax codes than the U.S. Simplify, flatten.
That's a big job.
It's a huge job, because the tax code, the rates are high in the U.S., both personally and corporate, because of the lobbyists that infest Washington. They control politicians. They've bought and paid for Washington. It's corrupt to the bone with this campaign system we've got. Pay someone some campaign money and, you know, get the tax code complicated. Just, I'll give you a little for example. So fix the tax code. Second thing, we've got to fix regulations in this country. We were the third most economically free country in the world as recently as the year 2000. We're now number 17th freest economy in the world. We are less economically free than Canada and Great Britain. Now this is nuts. So we take laws like Dodd-Frank that my opponent Scott Brown and Jeanne Shaheen voted for, which is really hurting the New Hampshire economy. The too big to fail banks, the Wall Street banks, more risky than they were before Dodd-Frank was passed. Their financial ratios are just as bad, still 22-1, and the American taxpayer is still on the hook for the next bailout when they go south again, and they will. And it's Dodd-Frank bill with its 30,000 pages of regulations is hurting small business. I was meeting a gentleman just yesterday up in the Conway area talking about his business, a brilliant 31-year-old entrepreneur ready to grow. He can't get a loan from a bank because Dodd-Frank has stopped small banks from lending to small business entrepreneurs in our state, stifling job growth. Good for Wall Street. They got off scot-free on the meltdown. Taxpayers still on the hook. Now, how did Dodd-Frank get passed into law? The two people I'm running against, whose names I mentioned, voted for it. And they got, in one case, one gentleman got over $3 million from Wall Street in campaign contributions. Jeanne Shaheen got $1 million from Wall Street and the financial industry. Now, did they get it in return for voting for Dodd-Frank? Ask yourself. Washington is corrupt to the bone, and we can't fix our political problems because you're going to need people in this US Senate who are committed not to their campaign contributors, who are these lobbyists in Wall Street that want to make the tax code complicated with their special tax breaks and the regulatory apparatus convoluted so that they can support Wall Street or whatever else they're supporting. We need someone representing the people of the state of New Hampshire, committed to solving the problems of the country and not bought and paid for.
You brought up something earlier, too, about education and doing away with the Department of Education. And they're directing right now the Common Core down through the state's buying it, and the state's making the Board of Education locally follow that. How do you feel about that part?
Common Core, instigated by, a small handful of people under cover of some number of governors having agreed that it's a good idea, was foisted upon the states using our tax money bribing us so that we can get out from under No Child Left Behind, which was a problem in our state because too many schools were labeled failures. So we were bribed with our own tax money to implement Common Core. Common Core is yet another top-down, one-size-fits-all, federally inspired education fix. We've tried them, they don't work. What works in the United States is having multiplicity of choices, give parents choice, allow local school boards, local school districts, and parents to have, again, choices, allow innovation from the bottom up, and let's see what works and what doesn't work. The federal government cannot impose one solution on the entire country because it may work in one state or one town, but it won't work in the other one. We're a country where our federal government is specifically limited to certain constitutional powers, and running local school boards is not one of those powers. So we're better off if we can allow choices, diversity, bottom-up innovation. And we'll
set our own standards.
Set our own standards, and let's see what works. And things that don't work will not get imitated, and things that do work, like the Academy of Science and Design right here in Nashua, will get imitated and is being imitated. They're trying to start one like ASD over in Windham right now because it worked. So it's bottom-up innovation, testing and seeing what works, choices for parents, and different strokes for different folks. So
the kids at the Academy really enjoy that. I've been up there watching them.
And they take special needs students, and kids are getting into the Ivy League, and they have highest test scores, as I mentioned, and they're operating at far, far less cost per student. So it's solving problems for folks. So is the federal government fixing education in New Hampshire? Or is bottom-up innovation fixing education in New Hampshire? So Common Core, no, not the answer.
Well, I think that philosophy has to follow in a lot of areas, not just education.
Exactly. We're onto core Republican principles. Freedom of choice, free markets, individual liberty, constitutionally limited government. And these concepts sound dusty and dry, but when you turn them into something like charter schools that are turning kids' lives around, that are making parents happy, teachers happy, that are saving taxpayers money, we're showing how these principles of freedom can work for people and make people's lives better. So I'd like, instead of compromising with President Obama and voting his way, yes, you can stop gridlock that way, but it'll just make the country's problems worse.
No, but you got to build with, you know, all people who are thinking the same way, whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, or whatever.
Right.
If you can get them together on a concept like this.
If we can get what I'm proposing, and this is, you go to my website, jimrubens.com, you'll see many, many dozens of ideas that I'm proposing to get this country to turn our economy around, to balance our budget, to get government out of our lives, to allow people to flourish, to allow middle-class incomes to come back to the country again. These are essential solutions we have to have for the government. I'm showing how it can be done in the context of freedom without federalization of our lives.
You need people to help you with your campaign?
Absolutely.
Get the word out.
JimRubens.com. We'll take signs, we'll take checks, we'll take volunteers.
Well, you only got a few more days to go before the primary, so good luck, Jim, and we appreciate you coming on board. And if you are lucky enough to go and get the nomination, we'll see you back in October.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you very much.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.